Claire Nouvian is a renowned French environmentalist who devotes her life to protecting the oceans. So absolutely relevant with the conference we had this morning with François Sarano. And fighting the primary cause of its destruction, industrial fishing. Claire has won numerous awards, including the prestigious Goldman Prize. She founded the NGO BLOOM at the end of 24, which has come France NGO BLOOM, France leading organization on the protection on the ocean and marine life. BLOOM, this NGO, conducts scientific research, legal actions, advocacy, and citizen mobilization to achieve systemic changes in fishing practices. BLOOM secured a ban on deep sea bottom trawling in Europe in 2016, as well as the European-wide ban on electric fishing in 2019. BLOOM is now seeking to obtain the true marine protected area by banning bottom trawling, as well as aiming to ensure the survival of artisanal fishing, which is threatened by industrial fishing lobbies. Claire Nouvian, she is the director of the BLOOM NGO that she has funded, and she delivers many courses and conferences across the world. She also wrote some books, The Deep, The Extraordinary Creatures of the Abyss, for instance, and she was also director, documentary filmmakers, producer, executive producer, and productions coordinator. Please welcome with me Claire Nouvian.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to put this here. So I can't really see you, which is always a bit weird, but that's the way it goes. I thought quite hard about what to tell you today. I was thinking, reading through presentations of IPCC reports, IPBES reports, NASA, European Space Agency, and so on. I was reading through this stuff, and I was thinking, if I tell them about this, it's going to be really tough. And so I thought hard about how to deliver what is going on in the real world out there without being depressing, and I haven't found a way. So I just thought, let's go with it, right? So I know it's an Imagination Week, this is the theme, and so thinking about the environment, what we're doing to the environment, to the planet, to ourselves, and linking it to imagination, the first thing that comes to mind is that you need your imagination to grasp reality. That's what you need. Because we don't have that, and if we don't have that, and we haven't had it so far, we're not able to really understand what's going on in terms of scale and rapidity. And so you can't think of imagination and environment without thinking about Günther Anders. Who knows Günther Anders? Oops, not one hand. Seriously? Not one person. Okay, well, I'm really glad I put several quotations by this person. Who knows Hannah Arendt? Oh, okay. Well, he was the first husband of Hannah Arendt. He's a German philosopher, obviously not well known enough. He's the thinker of Hiroshima. And he said, today's immorality or fault lies not in sensuality or infidelity, not in dishonesty or immorality, not even in exploitation, but in the lack of imagination. And he's the Hiroshima thinker, per se. He really thought about what happened after Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings on Japan with nuclear weapons. And he thought, from that moment on, we understand that our minds are not made to understand such global disasters. Our brains can understand this room. I can understand this room. I can understand your campus. I can maybe kind of grasp Cergy. I can't even really think about Paris. It's too many people already. France moves beyond. The world? No way. There's no way we can really understand what we're doing to the planet. And so Günther Anders from the get-go said, what we've invented with the nuclear weapon is the possibility to destroy everything in this world. There is a before and after. And this is how we can link it to what's going on now. So before bombings were local events. With Hiroshima, it became a global event. We were able to wipe out an entire city within a split second. We're able to do that, and we're able to understand from that moment on, and that's what Günther Anders has done for us. He said, if there is anything that modern man regards as infinite, it's no longer God, nor is it nature, let alone morality or culture, it's his own power. That's what's infinite right now. We have the power to do all of that. And that, of course, has consequences. Hiroshima consequences have been long-lasting, as you know. The disaster was way beyond what happened just now and then. It's a really fascinating read that you should really get into with Günther Anders, because he said Hiroshima is everywhere. And that's a book that he wrote in French, Hiroshima est partout, translated as such, but you can read about this philosopher because he's really accessible. He made sure that his thinking was accessible for everyone. So he even wrote theater, you know, sort of gave a lot of oral conferences and presentations, which are extremely easy to understand and grasp. And it's extremely important to understand what he says, because he basically says, when you look at what we're able to do, even with the single war at any moment in history, but especially since Hiroshima, you know, the question is not, how does one become a moralist? Rather, the question is, how is it possible not to become a moralist in the world we live in? So there's for those that read French, there's an extremely small book called Et si je suis désespéré, que voulez-vous que j'y fasse? It takes you less than an hour to read if you can read French, and that really gets it all together. And I think that's what we need to understand to see that even from 1945 and onwards, people have been thinking about the consequences of our possibility, our material possibility to wipe out anything on the planet. And a few scientists, are you familiar with the limits to growth? Yeah. Okay, so I don't know if you've read the book or if you've read the report, but the limits to growth is a really interesting story, as the Club of Rome, thinkers, intellectuals, businessmen, all together, commissioned the MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a report to try to extrapolate what we had in terms of trends, how much we used of planetary resources, and if we extrapolated them into the future, what would that say? And so that's what they did, and it was a really vanguard, adventure, because the scientists were actually using computer science at very high-speed level for the first time, and they were able to really modelize the Earth system. And they showed basically, and that's what the outcomes were, the striking results were that there is a complete incompatibility between exponential economic and population growth and infinite supply of resources on the other hand, right? And so the report, it took them 2 years to plot all the results they had, all the data, every single data, every figure, everything that was available on the planet, everything we knew about, pollution, production, consumption, growth, everything they had, they plotted it into a computer system that they called World 3. And they managed to modelize what would happen in the future. And they had different scenarios. And obviously, their conclusion was that in the absence of massive, significant alterations, changes to the way we live and produce, eat, and go around, move around the planet, populate the planet, the way we live, basically our way of living, if we had a massive change to this, there would be an abrupt and unmanageable decrease in both population and industrial production at a very, actually quite fast pace. Their exact conclusion was, if the present growth trends in world population, industrialization, pollution, food production, and resource depletion continue unchanged, the limits to growth on this planet will be reached sometime within the next 100 years. This was in 1972, 51 years ago, or actually in 2024, almost 52 years ago. The conclusion was the most probable result will be a rather sudden and uncontrollable decline in both population and industrial capacity. That caused huge criticism, uproar, chaos. Everybody criticized them, right? There were attacks from all sides, industrial scientists, paid by the industry, businessmen, financial institutions, you name it. The book itself was actually a pretty big success. From that moment onwards, there were actually 30 million copies that were sold. That's massive for a book, right? Nonetheless, the critics were so severe that they basically had all these scientific criticism, basically bashed at them. So with time, other scientists were able to verify that actually their research was quite accurate. So critics in those days could not imagine that 2 centuries of impressive growth, limitless growth, in Western economic production and consumption could actually ever run into any limits. So they portrayed the limits to growth reports as a doomsday prophecy. That's what came back all the time. You people are doom and gloom. That's all you do. You're just prophets. You're telling us that we're going to go to hell and our way of living is not sustainable. And that's exactly what they said. It's not sustainable. We have to do a radical turnaround. But nobody listened, right? People heard, thought about it, criticized, and then moved on. And so what we did is waste 3 precious decades that could have helped to transition away from our current model of living. Since 1972, there was the Limits of Growth report that was create massive echo around the planet. Then the IPCC was formed in 1988. An Inconvenient Truth, do you remember this? Or are you too young? Al Gore. That was a big movie. Everybody, that's when climate change really made it into the public consciousness in 2006. And of course, the Paris Agreement in 2015, which is non-binding, as you know. And in the meantime, since 1972, what we've had is a series of merchants of doubt. Have you read this book, Merchants of Doubt? Anyone? Come on. You people need to read more interesting stuff. No, this is more than interesting. This is absolutely fundamental. Naomi Oreskes, she did this huge research on showing that the industry pays scientists to create doubt, because doubt allows the industry and allows policymakers to not make decisions. So you just create doubt. So that's what they did. And she showed that it's actually quite the same people that were paid by the industry to create doubt over global warming, over tobacco, over acid rain. And they were the same scientists that could actually change topics. And they use the same methodology, create doubt. So that's one way. There's a way to actually create doubt about things, or to create some controversy, is to say this is all wrong. That's one way. But at some point, when the evidence becomes too big and too thick, and you can't really ignore it anymore, another way is to create doubt. So instead of saying that tobacco doesn't lead to lung cancer, you can say, well, there are other factors. There's lead in, home painting. And people are going to go, wow, lead. Yeah, there is lead in home paintings. So if you put painting on your wall, there was lead, and lead was not good. That's true. So you create this whole discussion about lead, which was great, because then we did do something about the fact that there is lead in paintings, and there is no longer lead in paintings, or not supposed to at least. But in the meantime, you've waited all that moment, all that precious moment, those precious years, to actually act on the fact that tobacco does lead to lung cancer. End of the story. So that's what they did for everything, including global warming. And as a result, as NOAA, which is the climate atmospheric institution in the US that does all the climate plotting, said, despite decades of negotiation, the global community has been unable to significantly slow, let alone reverse, annual increases in atmospheric CO2 levels. This is where we are now. Carbon dioxide is at levels our species has never experienced before. We have known about this for half a century, and we have failed to do anything meaningful about it. What will it take for us to wake up? And this is Peter Tance, a senior scientist that said this just a few weeks ago. What will it take for us to wake up? CO2 concentrations can't get away from that one. That is a graph that shows just until 2010, and the next one takes it from that moment onwards, but the increase is so steep that we have to start with this. CO2 levels were around 280 ppm for almost 6,000 years of human civilization. Now we're at, actually right now we're at 425 ppm, but so 2022, 421 parts per million, so 421 ppm of CO2 in the atmosphere. The level of increase is about 2.13 ppm per year. Annual emissions have increased from 11 billion tons of carbon in the 60s to 36 billion tons of carbon in 2022. Now, if we take it from that moment, you can see historical emissions. And are you familiar with the scenarios of IPCC? All of you? All right, so you know that we're during, actually I can skip that one, that's good. That's already that much time that we can gain. Did you read what happened in 2023 during COP28? Of course, there were all these moments because the COP28 was really quite something this year in terms of fraud and corruption and actually oil market where people came and signed deals. But the forecast that was done by UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Program, shows that optimistic scenarios were buried, and that came out just during COP28. Did you follow this? Did you follow this? That they said that the Paris Agreement scenario is buried right now? There's no way we're going to meet the deadlines. There's no way we're going to stay within these boundaries. So UNEP pulled out this report, Broken Record, and did a pretty nice cover, showing how temperatures hit new highs and that the world is heading for a temperature rise far above the Paris Agreement, far above it. So 2023 was the hottest year on record, and among the warmest years in at least 100,000 years. There were simply no cities, as Carlo Buontempo, which you might enjoy the fact that his name is Buontempo and he leads the Copernicus climate change program of the EU, which in Italian means good weather. So it's always quite nice to see that your last name might actually put you on the tracks of a career. But so Carlo Buontempo said that there were simply no cities, books, agriculture, or domesticated animals on this planet the last time the temperature was so high. We're seeing things that no one has ever seen before and experience things that none of our ancestors has ever had to deal with. So these are the temperatures anomalies, if you want to see a graphic version of them. This is the same thing for the surface temperatures. I'm sure you're familiar with all of this. Oceanic records, because now we can focus a little more on the ocean, especially because you've heard François just before me, I hear, so we can stay within the same realm. Ocean records in terms of temperatures, sea surface temperatures were unprecedented, and the rhythm at which the temperature increase goes is unseen before. So non-stop records. In Florida, waters were up 38 degrees in June. In the Northeast Atlantic, even in Scotland, in June, temperatures were about 5 degrees above average, which is crazy for Scotland. I mean, Scottish fishermen could not believe what they were seeing. In the Mediterranean, the temperature on average is at 28.7 degrees, which is an absolute record. This is a very important report, one of the special reports that the IPCC produced, as it does thematic reports once in a while, and this one was on the ocean and cryosphere in 2019, and it reminded us as an opener that all people on Earth depend directly or indirectly on the ocean and cryosphere. The ocean is 71% of the planet, maybe François already said this, and 97% of the water. The cryosphere is 10% of the Earth, which is glaciers or ice sheet. It's 10% of land. So that's what we have to understand. And remember, we are connected to the ocean, whatever happens. There's no way we can live without stabilizing the climate and therefore the ocean and the other way around, as they're completely interdependent. The projected responses of the ocean cryosphere to past and current human-induced greenhouse gas emissions and ongoing global warming include climate feedbacks, changes over decades to millennia that cannot be avoided, thresholds of abrupt change, and irreversibility. Familiar with the AMOC, the thermohaline circulation, the deep circulation of water around the planet? Have you read anything about this? Has any of you read about AMOC? 2, 3, 4, all right, 5, 6 or 7 people. All right. So this is what makes our world habitable in terms of temperatures. There is a redistribution of warmth from hot areas to cooler areas and the other way around, thanks to the circulation of water. So this is how it goes. It's not that we're going to become experts. I don't want you to become oceanographers today, but you need to understand that AMOC, so this is the circulation around the planet, which carries the extra heat to redistribute it, which makes the ocean a thermostat, a regulator of the ocean, like the surface temperatures around the world. And without the circulation of AMOC, so when you have a circulation collapse, because the water, which is warmer in the surface, does not sink anymore because it's not cool enough. So when you increase surface temperatures, you increase the temperatures of the water and the water cannot sink, and therefore the circulation could stop. If that happened, that would really increase the effects of climate change in a very, very sudden way. And that's why we need to understand this, because you have right now, because it's a very stringent winter in Sweden, you read people on Twitter or elsewhere actually saying, hey, you ecologists, you're telling us that actually there's climate change, but look, it's minus 46 in Sweden. Where's your climate change? Where's your global warming, right? Well, it is linked. The fact that it's extra cool in an area or super hot in another area are linked to the same phenomena. The same phenomenon when it comes to AMOC, to the fact that you have a global circulation. If you do have, global temperature that increases, you do have a stop in the circulation of these masses of water, and that links to a deregulation of the climate. The UNESCO in 2021 warned that the ocean also risks losing its ability to absorb excess CO2. Right now, the ocean acts as a major sink. It takes up to a third, of the carbon emissions. But if we keep on going, that might stop. So we would be in a position where the ocean, instead of absorbing, would actually start emitting. And that's what the UNESCO warned in 2021, and now we're at this excess and record heat ever. How do you say, sorry? Estoy pensando en español, no sé por qué. No, grabado, ¿cómo se dice? Registered, sorry. It's like that's what happens with don't you have that? Like if you speak Chinese or Japanese, sometimes you've got like interferences. Some people speak Spanish on that side. So ice mass melting will keep on going because you hear about glaciers and ice melting everywhere on the planet without connecting it to fires, without connecting to the global stability of our climate. So Antarctica is losing ice, called mass melting, at an average rate of about 150 billion tons a year. Greenland is losing about 270 billion tons a year of ice, and that's adding directly to sea level rise. That's NASA. Ice loss from Greenland and Antarctica has increased fivefold since 1990s, and now accounts for a quarter of sea level rise. So when that happens, when there is ice loss, there are, direct implications on what we've said in terms of climate stability, but now we can look at more precise factors. Ice loss has an impact on the fauna directly. Have you read the stories that came last summer about in 2022, about emperor penguins? Has anybody read about the emperor penguins? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, because you didn't read the news about the fact that entire colonies of penguin chicks were dying? Did you read this? So it's crazy because scientists who go to Antarctica have witnessed something that they had never seen before. On certain colonies, quite a few actually, the majority of colonies that they were monitoring, there was 100% mortality of the chicks because they were either going through the ice because the ice was melting, or there was rain. And in Antarctica, it's not supposed to rain. And the chicks don't have feathers that are actually rain-proof. So they died of cold. And that's what's going to happen to penguins and emperor penguins, which are, of course, extremely, charismatic, very tall and beautiful. But if there is no respect of the Paris Agreement, which, of course, you would know that we're supposed to limit to 2 degrees maximum, ideally, stay within 1.5 degrees, but that's not going to happen. So if there is no respect of the Paris Agreement, 98% of colonies will have disappeared by 2100. Sea level rise consequences are also due to climate change. Sea level rise is only due to climate change. There is no other factor. It's the melting of glaciers and ice sheet, and it's the thermal expansion of water. And from 1903 to 2002, the level of increase was 2.7 millimeters per year. Since 2013 already, we're at 4.6 millimeters per year. So we basically have a centimeter every other year, which is massive. That means in the different scenarios that the IPCC has plotted, that we would have a collapse of Antarctic ice by the end of the century. So we would have a sea level rise by of course, that sounds like a long time ahead of us, by 2300, a sea level rise of 9 to 10 meters. And if the Paris Agreement is actually endorsed and put in place, the rise would be limited to 2.2 meters to 2.5 meters, which is already a lot. That means that we would have mass floodings, erosion of coastline, salt contamination of groundwater and farmland, which is already the case, loss of habitats for flora and fauna, dramatic combination of extreme weather events like hurricanes, storms, typhoons, etc., destruction of underwater and underground cables, which is already the case in the United States especially. The sea level rise consequences are that forces migrations. Archipelagos are erased from the map. 10% of humanity, more or less, lives on coastlines. That would be submerged. There would be floodings of all or parts of Bangladesh, China, India, Netherlands, cities like Lagos, Bangkok, Mumbai, Shanghai, etc. So over half of the most affected 20 cities in the world by 2050 are actually located in the Mediterranean. So that's what happens in our brave new world. This is Florida in 2018. These are, recurrent events all over archipelagos. And this is just France right now. That's just a few days ago in the north of France. And that is connected to, I'm going to go to that group that keeps talking. Do you know why there's floods in the north of France right now? Do you want to give a shot? Too much water in the ground, lots of rain, too much water in the ground is flat, there's no evacuation, and sea level rise. Because the level of the water in the ocean has already increased, there is no, possibility to actually pump the water out. So that's where even sea level rise has an impact already on what we're seeing right now in France. This is not far from us. The increase of temperatures also has, of course, an impact on the temperature of the water itself in the ocean and on marine heat waves, which are defined as 5 days in a row of temperatures which are higher than 90% of the time. Marine heat waves have doubled since 1982. They're on a trend of exponential increase since 2000, twice more frequent. There were 30 heat waves until 2000, and there's been over 100 since. They could become a lot more frequent by 2100. Mediterranean, as usual, heats up more rapidly than anywhere else. These are the marine heat waves we've known around the world. They're a global phenomenon. They're all over the place. They do conduct to massive mortalities in the water. Scientists talk about marine heat waves as underwater fires. Animals actually die as if they were burnt. So those that cannot move away, like mussels or oysters, they completely die. The die-off is 100%. Those that can move usually try to move. In certain areas, like the Gulf of Texas, they can't move anywhere, so they die off. So that leads to a massive reorganization of marine life. It's ultra rapid. It's such a big phenomenon that actually even scientists say that we have an issue trying to really understand what's going on. It's going so fast. Everything is going so fast. So fish migrate to poles at what speed? So at least you can read. 5.6 kilometers a year. Can you imagine this or not? 5.6 kilometers a year for fish to move towards the poles. That means areas which are dependent on fish resources are deprived of resources faster than anywhere else in the world. So we, the North, have exploited the South with industrial machineries, basically, since we've colonized these countries, and now the fish are even coming our way. They're coming towards Scotland and Norway. This is, what's going on is incredible. Fishers obviously follow them in areas which were not fished before, like the Arctic Circle, with destructive fishing methods. So this is what's going on in terms of heat waves. There's also acidification. I hope you're all very familiar with this, and that's the reason why you're talking over there. Acidification has increased 26% since 1800, with a potential plus, increase of 150% by 2100. So 10 times more rapid than during the past 50 million years. That means the, dissolution of skeleton from animals, so oysters, corals. Corals only, represent about 1% of marine ecosystems in the ocean, so they're not that, sort of far widespread and all over, but they do host 25% of marine diversity. And coral reefs are due to and on the track to disappear by 2050. So how old are you, more or less? Like 22, 3? Something like that? So when you're my age, about 50, there'll be no more coral reefs. the first cause of destruction of the ocean does remain, so far, historically, overfishing, industrial fishing. Although food security comes for half of the world's population from the ocean, we've lost about 90% of predatory fish. So this comes on top of climate change. That's what you have to understand. I mean, we've done everything wrong with the planet in terms of extracting resources, whether living or non-living resources. Our extractive behavior has led already to collapses, such as the collapse of biodiversity. So we killed 3 million whales, which is the history's largest biomass killing ever. Hundreds of thousands of dolphins every year. Actually, there's 100,000 dolphins which are actually directly targeted by fishing. Same goes for turtles. 7 species of turtles are threatened with extinction. And we've already lost, in terms of biomass, of fish which are larger than 16 kilos in the North Sea, so next to France and Belgium and Denmark. We've lost, since 1900, since the beginning of industrial fishing, we've lost 99% of fish. So where there was 100 fish in 1900, there is 1 remaining today. This is how much of a vacuum that was created over the years because of our industrial means of exploitation. Scientists have mapped the loss of large predatory fish biomass in the North Atlantic, and they've put it on this map. So this is how much fish there was in 1900. So you can imagine that the color concentration shows how dense the biomass was. So this is 1900, and this is 2000. Since then, it's decreased further. These are also the trends for the global ocean of predatory fish decline since 1950. You can see that we've basically mined everything that was alive in the ocean. It shows on historical pictures, for example, contests, for fishers that do sports fishermen in the US, for example, that go after very large fish like groupers or sharks or sailfish or whatnot. And this is a thesis that was done by a PhD student, Mac Lenehan, and she reconstructed through pictures with these photo contests of these sports fishers. And in 1956, this is the size of the fish that were collected by the sports fishers. This is 1980. You can see that the fish have decreased in size and number. And this is 2007. There's almost nothing left except a small little shark here and there. Today, this is the proportion of the fish stocks that are, within safe biological and sustainable levels. So it's just gone, down since 1974. That's when I was born. So after the fish, what comes in is the reign of gelatinous organisms. So when you do take most of the large predatory fish, the large animals, demersal fish that live on the near the bottom of the ocean, you take that diversity and that abundance away. And that is replaced over time with pelagic fish, i.e. small fish that live in the water column. And over the years, you start actually targeting these fish because the large fish have gone down and they're not in the nets anymore. So that's what fishing vessels do. Now they go and they track small pelagic fish, which are extremely abundant because they're a food item, which is a staple item in food chains. And after they've taken that away, you move on to the gelatinous reign of jellyfish, microbes, bacteria, which is already the case pretty much all along the coast. So we need imagination to be able to understand everything I've said, which is just a fraction of what you would need to know. We need imagination to do that because it's not natural, because we're not computers. And that's why the Limits to Growth report, when they turned to Dennis Meadows and his colleagues to compute the Earth system, it's because our brains are not able to do it. It's difficult for us to live with that knowledge at any given moment, to just understand all of this in this moment, right here and right now, and to act on it. And if you're not able to understand this, to understand that the catastrophe is actually here already, it means you don't think. I didn't say it. Jean-Pierre Dupuy, another philosopher, said that. He said, if you don't believe in the catastrophe, it really means you don't think. So you have to use your brain, because we can be quite smart. We can maybe not outsmart computers to understand complex systems like the Earth system, but we can try, we can strive, we can try to take responsibility on this, because it is really quite bad and never seen before. So we need imagination to grasp the reality of where we are, where you are, because if all goes well, I'll be gone before you are. So you need imagination to grasp this, and you need imagination to act on this mess. There is a book that's going to come out on the 14th of January, and I don't know what day is it today. I know it's like the 10th or something, or 11th. So in 3 or 4 days' time, a book by this man, a historian of technology and science and environment, Jean-Baptiste Fressoz, he's got a book coming out called Sans Transition, Without Transitions, and he's looked with his colleagues, they're extremely well known, they've done a lot of absolutely magnificent studies, and he shows that there's never been an energy transition, per se, in the history of humanity. What we've had is a replacement and an addition, and not a replacement, but an addition of energy source on top of the other. Oil is absolutely and has never been a replacement and a substitute for coal. Oil extraction relies on steel and coal. Cars, concrete roads, everything we've produced in the 19th and 20th century actually used massive volumes of coal. And he looks at the history of our use of energy to produce things from a material point of view. And I really encourage you to understand this and to read this book, or at least listen to what this man says on the radio and in the media, because he's been quite well covered. We need to understand that from a material point of view, you know, humanity has not gone through a history of transitions. It's a symbiotic dynamic of accumulation of all materials and energy. And this is our challenge, you know. We need to face this challenge. The more coal economies consumed, the more wood they were consuming. In coal mines, that's why I put this thing, because of course in the 19th century you don't have that many photos to go into the archives, but drawings. The pillars that held the mines together were made out of wood. So actually, when you look at the UK consumption of wood, the English coal mines, you know, put the UK in a position to actually use more wood in 1900 than the whole of the England had burnt in 1750. So next is, what do you do with this? What do you feel your responsibility is? And I would like to hear you about this, because you're the ones who are going to be in charge. I mean, I can always throw things around and we can have a discussion about this. You know, of course we need to stop emitting. Nobody knows how to do that. Even if we stop today, sea level rise would continue well beyond 2050. Industrial fishing is the first cause of destruction of the ocean. One of the things you could do, of course, boycott industrial fish right away, easy. You can do that any moment. I don't think you don't have that much of an offer of industrial fish on campus. It doesn't seem, at least, but still, you can take that away. There are many things we can do, like stop fish subsidies and oil subsidies and stop subsidizing things. All of that we can, I think we know this, yeah? We need to reinforce ecosystem resilience, seek maximum social profits instead of financial profits, seek minimal environmental impacts. But at the end of the day, we need to rethink society through the lens of solidarity and democracy, which is not exactly what's happening right now in terms of trends, if you've noticed, as humanity is approaching tipping points that will destabilize the Earth system in an irreversible manner. That's what the limits to the planetary boundaries that you may be familiar with is actually telling us. So we're there, you know, it's been decades of, you know, doing these prophecies, telling that we're going right into the wall. We are in the wall. So what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? There's no way around the fact that materially, it's not just about emissions. Materially, we have to degrow. We have to deconsume. We have to completely change the way we live and occupy this planet. Right away, not in 20 years' time, right away. And if you are due to become leaders of companies, banks, maybe go into politics, that's going to be your challenge. And you're quite old already, right? 20-something, gosh. Most geniuses were already geniuses by then. So you can just take your mission and now start delivering on it, because it's now. Principles of degrowth, as you may know, sustainability, circularity. I'm sure you know all of this by heart. I don't even want to go into it. I'm sure you know, right? At the end of the day, we just consume too much stuff that we don't need, that the Earth cannot support. We cannot stand the pace at which we are occupying, the way we live, occupying this planet. So that has to change. And there is no option where, you know, we can all have an electric car and go around without any problems. Electric cars for the whole of the planet is not going to work. Hydrogen engines are not going to work. Solutions which sell, you know, some sort of ideal scenario where we could keep on living the way we do will not work, and everybody knows them, and everybody knows that, at least for now. So this is where we are, and I think it puts us in a really, really new situation, morally, philosophically. What do we do with this? What will you do with this? This is attributed to Albert Einstein, but actually nobody really knows, but I think it's good anyway. Insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and to expect different results. And that's it. At the end of the day, we have to all live simply so that others can simply live. You know, not reinventing the wheel. Why would we? Gandhi said this. Still true, more true than ever. So I have no idea, because I have no watch. I broke my watch. I have no idea what time it is now. But I'm done. And I'd like to hear you now.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you very much for your inspirational speech. I would like to call the students that they've prepared a question. If you can join us on stage, please. Thank you very much. All right, please, you can start your first question.
Hi. So you founded a political party, a green political party, in 2018, Place Publique, and you left it 1 year later, maybe because you felt like things were not changing and that the initial goal of the party had been hijacked. So to you, is it a lost battle to make things change politically regarding the environment?
No, I don't think there is such a thing as a lost battle. I think there are just battles which are not waged, and they all need to be waged. I just think that we need to go and do what we're good at. And I'm not good at standing hypocrisy and lies and little maneuvers, and there was too much of that in the political life of a party of people with a lot of ambition, very little integrity, trying to push everybody aside to make space for themselves, and I couldn't deal with that. So I just thought, I'm not good at that, but I'm good at influencing politicians and putting pressure on them. So I'll just stay on the other side of the fence.
My question is, how do you manage to convince your friends and your family, and I think particularly to your mother, who I think runs or used to run an industry of textile, to be more aware of environmental issues and to change their behavior towards environment? What are your best advices for us?
I think what we've done to the planet has spoken for itself. So I think also my mother, because I was brought up partly in Hong Kong, and she was moved there by her company, and so she saw the production of textile. Now we're talking about the 1980s, right? And she told me a story just actually about a few weeks ago, and I was quite struck. And she had visited a garment factory in China, and the people that were with her said, we have another sort of plant which is doing little car toys, you know, for supermarkets in the West. And so they said, do you want to go through the factory to see what it's like? And she's like, yeah, sure. And so they went in the little car toys plant, and they were workers painting these little cars, and they were behind. So there was a path in the middle of the factory, and there were large plastic seals, you know, that were, you know, sort of making sure that the paint would not go in the central path. But the minute she entered the building, she was like, this is unbreathable. I mean, the thing was not breathable. All the toxic fumes from the industrial painting. And she was going through this, and she's like, oh my God. And she could see, like, the workers didn't even have a mask. And she was like, she said to the man, this is horrible. I mean, how can you stand this? How can they stand this? And he said, yeah, it's really bad. We have to change them every 3 months. And he was talking about the workers. And so my mom saw that. So she saw the voracious aspects of capitalism. And she was really turned off. And I think now, you know, they realize that their 30 years or so of exponential growth and exponential wealth were not sustainable. And we had a discussion over Christmas, actually, where my parents, my mom and stepdad, actually apologized. And they said, we really screwed up this whole thing. And we're leaving such a mess for you guys. We're like, yes, thank you. But at least they were aware, and they feel that they really missed the plot. They really missed it. And they contributed to this gigantic, selfish, disgusting world. So at least they were aware, but not my whole family is. I do have pretty bad people in my family as well, like everyone.
Hello. You said that when we see those numbers, if we think a minimum, we should be alarmed about what's coming up. So how do you manage when you see these numbers to stay positive about the future, if you are positive in any?
I'm not positive at all about the future. Nobody is anymore. I mean, that's the moral question I had to myself coming here. I realized that you guys don't spend that much time doing all these like scientific reading. It's not part of your curriculum, right? And I think you should, because that's the only thing you should be doing. That's really the only thing you should be doing in your generation, is try to fix this mess. There's nothing else that counts. Nothing else will count. You know, so it's really strange. During the Christmas break, we were along the Atlantic coast with my family, and we're going along the coast, and I realized our conversation was all about, whoa, that house is nice. Well, it will be underwater in 2050, and this one is nice. Well, it will be underwater in 2075, you know? And that's our conversation. So we just accepted the fact that it's all screwed, you know? It's crazy, but it can be worse. The thing is, it can be a lot worse. So if we act seriously on it, if you act seriously on it, i.e., there's nothing else that counts. If you manage to fix the mess, because that's your mission, then maybe it's only going to be a meter of sea level rise, for example, by 2100, right? But if we don't, it's going to be a lot worse, right? So it's bad, but it can be a lot worse, you know? So I think, yeah, right now, it's not about being, you know, there's another quote that I should have put up by Günther Anders. Really, do read that book if you do speak French. It only will take an hour on the RER back and forth, you know, really. And he says, I don't need, you know, courage, you know, I don't need courage to act. You know, consolation, comforting, I don't need it. I haven't needed it so far. Hope, I don't know what it is. All I know is I've got to try to do anything that's in my capacity, anything and everything, to try to act on the mess we've created. And this is a guy that's saying this just a few years before he died, you know, so not maybe 20 years ago or something. So he thought we're already, because he had been doing the scientific reading, he already knew we're on a really wrong path. But man, can you imagine if he were here with us in 2024? He'd be like, maybe he would talk about comforting. Maybe he would say, I do need the comforting. Maybe I do need the consolation. But I think just act on things. It's not about hope. It's about acting. Just getting our acts together and doing it. Because it's now. It's not in 20 years' time. Everything we buy has a cost. And that cost cannot be borne by the planet anymore. End of the story. It takes resources and it takes energy. So everything has to be rethought. So it's a cultural battle you have to wage on top of a business battle. Business models will change. Everything is changing. And people who don't grasp it are just purely irresponsible. And you don't want to be on that side, right? I think. Right? Thanks. Merci. Yes.
Hello. So my question builds up on what was just said and what we were saying before. So, like, it has become evident that the catastrophe is there, it's irreversible, and we still keep fighting. And you, as a representative of your generation, you fought a lot. But for us, like, if you were to choose one main action, we, as a future generation, will have to implement, what will it be? And what is maybe like one trait of character or mentality that we have to adapt in order to be successful in achieving that goal?
I don't know about one action. I think understanding, really reading. One action, actually read. Please read. Don't just watch videos. Read the depth of understanding of philosophy books, social books, that book that I talked about, Sans Transition. Read this. Understand the material history of what it takes to produce what we have, the comfort we have, you know. So read a maximum. And that would be, for me, that would be the one action that would change the way you think, the way you perceive the world, and the way you perceive the mission you have, right? Because we are to have a mission. You know, that sounds very religious, but, you know, there's nothing more true than this right now. There's nothing more important. It crushes all. Whether we like it or not, we have to do it, right? And so read and then commit to things that are consistent with what you've read. And spend time helping NGOs. That's why we need every one of you to really put pressure on political powers. Politicians are irresponsible criminals. That's what they are. As Guterres, you know, from the UN said, he said, we've opened the gates to hell. That's what the humanity has done. We've opened the gate to hell. And that's because of the inaction of politicians. And we can get things from politicians, but we need to put them under maximum pressure. And that takes people who are connected. I suppose you all have a phone, right? And you all watch Instagram or whatnot. And therefore, if you're going to be connected, have useful connections. You know, follow us, follow François, follow all the NGOs that are out there fighting governments which are irresponsible, and they're burning your future. So make them accountable for that. And the trait of character, well, I don't know. I think it's so tough, and you might be completely oblivious to it. And I can see, because people are talking like, who cares? I can see that. It's going to catch up with you guys. Sorry. I'm not saying it. The whole world is saying it. Scientists are trying to wake up people, and they're not waking up. So what you need to have is courage, and at the same time, you need to culture and nurture joy, because it's too tough. So you need to spend a lot of time having a good time with your friends, without consuming stuff that you don't need, right? But just having a good time connecting with people, loving, laughing, dancing, doing all of that, so that you can repump your energy and go into a real fight afterwards. That's my take on things. Celebrate.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Claire. Merci, Claire Nouvian.